The shift didn't begin with the official letter from the district office. It began 6 months earlier, in the dim glow of Harland's classroom, after everyone else had gone home. That was when the quiet changed. It became deliberate, like he was measuring every word he wrote on the board, every paper he graded, knowing the clock was running out. When the email finally hit all staff inboxes that Tuesday morning, Sunset Ridge High will close its doors at the end of the semester due to ongoing budget shortfalls. The weight arrived with it. Harland was the first one in the teacher's lounge, as always. He stood by the ancient coffee maker, pouring cups with the same steady hands that had taught 3 generations of kids how to balance chemical equations and how to balance life when it tried to knock you down. "Keep it together for the kids," he said quietly when the rest of them filed in. His voice didn't shake, but something in it made the room feel smaller. For Harland, this school had never been just a job. You show up, you prepare, you endure. There are no hidden cuts in the budget that can erase 27 years of showing up for kids who had no one else. Elena sat at the scarred wooden table first, the bridge as always. She watched the way the fluorescent lights caught the new grey at Harland's temples, and remembered when these morning meetings were about complaining about grading stacks or laughing over terrible cafeteria food. She remembered when they used to fight for better textbooks, for field trips, for anything that might give their students a fighting chance. Today they weren't fighting for resources. They were fighting against the end of something none of them had ever imagined losing. Mike dropped into the chair beside her, trying to keep his usual coach swagger. He carried the heaviest emotional load without ever saying it, his jokes landing softer now, his eyes flicking to Harland every few seconds, like he was waiting for the man who had mentored him through his own divorce to crack first. He cracked a weak joke about finally getting to sleep in, but no one laughed. He was watching for the telltale pause in Harland's step. The moment the rock they all leaned on might shift. Paul stayed standing by the door, the anchor. He carried the printed budget reports like they were sacred, loaded with numbers he'd been studying since midnight. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, but his gaze never left Harland. He was waiting for the wobble, for the first sign that the man who had quietly covered for all of them over the years, taking extra duty shifts, paying for supplies out of pocket, being the one parent who actually showed up at games and concerts, was finally feeling the weight. The unspoken rule in the lounge that morning was simple. Nobody asked Harland how he's really doing. They all knew he'd been here longest. They all knew this building wasn't just walls to him. It was the only place he'd ever called home since his wife passed 12 years ago. By the time the bell rang for first period, the lounge felt hollow. They walked out together down the familiar hallway, shoes echoing on the same linoleum they'd walked for decades. Harland paused at the door to his chemistry lab, hand on the frame like he was memorizing the feel of it. "We still have a semester," he said, almost to himself. "That's enough time to make it count." Eleanor glanced at Mike and Paul. None of them argued, but something in Harland's voice told them this wasn't just about finishing strong for the students. This was about something bigger, something he wasn't saying yet. The school didn't feel like it was ending that day. It felt like it was waiting for Harland to decide how it would close. The weeks that followed felt like watching a slow leak in something you thought would last forever. Lockers were emptied earlier each day. The trophy case in the main hall started looking bare as parents quietly took things home. The photocopier jammed more often than it worked, and no one bothered to call maintenance anymore. Sunset Ridge High was bleeding out, one small dignity at a time. Harland never mentioned it. He just kept showing up at 6:15 a.m., same as always, thermos in hand, tie straight, shoes polished. But the rest of them noticed the changes. He stayed later and later. The lights in his chemistry lab burned until 9 or 10 p.m. most nights. Elena would see his silhouette through the frosted glass when she left after her own late nights, head bent over something that wasn't grading. She never asked. None of them did. The rule still stood. Nobody asks Harland how he's really doing. Then came the first quiet fracture. It was a Thursday after the final football practice of the season. Only 11 kids had shown up. Mike was packing up the equipment cart when Harland appeared at the gate, carrying a small wooden box under his arm. The old coach looked smaller in the fading light, but his shoulders were still squared, the way they'd been the day he'd mentored Mike through his divorce 6 years earlier. "Walk with me," Harland said. They stopped at Mike's truck. Harland handed him the box. "Open it when you're alone, not here." Mike waited until he was halfway home, pulled over on the shoulder under a flickering streetlight. Inside was a brand-new silver whistle on a lanyard, top of the line, the kind college coaches use, engraved on the back. Coach Mike Ramirez, Sunset Ridge forever, class of every kid you saved. Tucked beneath it was an envelope. Inside, a cashier's check for $8,400, exactly the amount Mike had quietly borrowed from Harland 3 years ago to cover his ex-wife's medical bills after she left. The note was one line, in Harland's careful teacher handwriting. "You paid me back with interest every time you stayed late for a kid who needed you. Consider the debt erased. Use the rest for new cleats. They deserve them." Mike sat in his truck for 20 minutes, staring at the check until the numbers blurred. Harland made a teacher's salary. Everyone knew he still lived in the same modest house he and his late wife had bought in 1998. Where had this come from? That night, the 4 of them ended up in the teacher's lounge anyway, something they hadn't done since the closure announcement. Paul had been poring over final budget reports again. Elena was pretending to organize her files. Harland walked in last, carrying a stack of old yearbooks. Paul couldn't hold it anymore. "Harland, what the hell are you doing?" Harland set the yearbooks down, gently, like they were fragile. I'm closing the books properly." Elena's voice cracked first. Mike showed us the whistle, the check. "You've been boxing things in your room every night. Old trophies, lab equipment, books with students' names written inside. You're not donating them to the district. You're giving them away." Harland looked at each of them for a long moment. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, like they always had, but tonight the sound felt different. "I started saving the day I got hired," he said quietly. "Every raise, every summer construction job, every tax refund. Marie and I never had kids. This school was our kid. 27 years of watching you three come in as scared first-year teachers and turn into the best damn educators I've ever known. Watching kids who were told they'd never amount to anything walk across that stage anyway. I kept a separate account, called it the Sunset Fund." He tapped the stack of yearbooks. "These last months, I'm not letting this place disappear like it never mattered. Every kid who ever sat in my room is getting something back. Every one of you is getting what I owe you for keeping me going after Marie died. I'm not asking permission. I'm just finishing the lesson." The lounge went completely still. For the first time since the letter arrived, someone had named the thing they'd all been afraid to touch. That Harland wasn't just losing a job. He was burying the only family he had left. Mike's hand tightened around the whistle in his pocket. Eleanor wiped her eyes. Paul took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. No one spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy with the weight of everything they were finally allowed to feel. The final weeks of Sunset Ridge High felt like watching a body slowly go cold while the heart was still beating. Every day brought another small death. The vending machines were emptied and unplugged. The library began boxing books for auction. The marquee outside that once proudly displayed "Home of the Eagles Class of 2025" now simply read "Thank you" in fading letters. Students walked the halls with a strange mix of excitement and grief, like they knew they were the last ones who would ever call this place home. Harland moved through it all like a man on a mission no one else could see. He started coming in even earlier, sometimes before 5:30 a.m. The custodian said his classroom light was already on when they arrived. Elena began noticing new things appearing on students' desks. A girl who had lost her mother in sophomore year found a brand new graphing calculator with a note that read, "You always worked harder than anyone gave you credit for. Keep going, Mr. H." A quiet boy who wanted to be an engineer discovered a used but perfectly maintained microscope with his name engraved on the side. These weren't cheap gestures. These were thoughtful, personal, expensive. One afternoon, Paul finally broke the silence in the lounge. "He's spending everything," Paul said, voice low. "I checked with the district. Harland cashed out his entire retirement account last month. All of it. He told them he didn't need a pension because He wasn't going to live long enough to use it anyway. Mike's face went pale. He lied. He didn't lie, Elena whispered. He just decided. He told the benefits lady he was moving to be closer to family, but he doesn't have any family left. That night they confronted him. They found Harland in his classroom at 8:47 p.m., surrounded by dozens of carefully wrapped packages. Old yearbooks with personal letters tucked inside, lab coats with students' names embroidered on them. Even the ancient periodic table poster that had hung above his desk for 20 years had been professionally restored and framed. Harland didn't look surprised to see them standing in his doorway. Elena spoke first, her voice trembling. "Harland, what are you doing, really?" He sat down slowly on the edge of his desk, the same desk where he'd taught thousands of teenagers that chemistry was just another word for change. "I'm making sure this place doesn't die quietly," he said. "Every kid who ever sat in these chairs is getting something that proves they mattered here. I've been tracking them down for months. Facebook, old emails, parents. Some of them are in college now. Some are in prison. Some are working 2 jobs just to eat. They're all getting something from this school before it closes." Mike stepped forward. "You cashed out your retirement, man. All of it." Harlan gave a small, tired smile. "Marie and I always said this school was our legacy. I don't need money where I'm going. I need to know I left something behind that can't be bulldozed when they tear this building down in September." Paul's voice cracked. "And where exactly are you going, Harlan?" For the first time, Harlan looked away. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a single plane ticket. One way, dated for the day after graduation. "I bought a small plot of land in rural Montana. Nothing fancy, just enough space for a cabin and a garden. I'm going to build it myself, and on the day they lock these doors for the last time, I'm going to disappear. No forwarding address, no goodbye parties. I don't want anyone feeling sorry for me. I just want to go somewhere quiet where I can remember what this place felt like when it was alive." The 3 of them stood frozen. This was the plan. Not just generous gifts, not just closing the books. Harlan had decided to erase himself along with the school. Elena felt something break inside her chest. "You were going to leave without telling us," she whispered. Harlan looked at each of them, eyes shining with something between peace and unbearable sadness. "I thought it would be easier that way." The classroom was completely silent, except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights that would soon be turned off forever. For the first time, the unspoken rule was shattered, and none of them knew how to put the pieces back together. The last day of Sunset Ridge High arrived like a quiet funeral no one wanted to attend. Graduation was held in the gym because the outdoor field had already been marked for demolition equipment. The bleachers were half empty. Many families had already moved on emotionally, but the seniors who walked across the makeshift stage carried something different in their eyes. They knew they were the final class. Harland stood at the back in his usual navy suit, the one he'd worn to every graduation for 27 years. He didn't give a speech. He never did. But every single graduate who crossed that stage received something personal from him. Some got handwritten letters. Others received old textbooks with decades of notes in the margins. One girl who dreamed of becoming a doctor found the stethoscope Harland's wife Marie had bought him the year she died, now engraved with the student's name and the words, "You were always meant to heal." By the time the last name was called, the truth had started spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Harland had spent every dollar he had. Elena, Mike, and Paul watched from the side as former students approached him one by one, many in tears, clutching items they had received in the mail over the past weeks. A young man, who was now a mechanic, showed off the expensive set of tools Harland had sent him. A girl now in nursing school revealed the laptop she'd received, with a note saying, "I never doubted you." The four of them cornered Harland in his classroom after the ceremony ended. The room was almost completely bare now. Only the old chalkboard remained. Paul spoke first, voice thick. "You sold your house too, didn't you?" Harland didn't deny it. He simply nodded. "I kept enough for the land in Montana and basic materials to build something small. The rest, I made sure it went where it belonged." Mike's hands were shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You gave away your entire life savings, your retirement, your house, everything." Harland looked at the three of them with the calmest eyes they had ever seen. "I had 27 years in this building," he said softly. 27 years of watching all of you grow up right alongside the kids. I watched Elena learn how to fight for her students. I watched Mike become the kind of coach who saves lives on and off the field. I watched Paul turn from a nervous first year into the best damn administrator this school ever had. I watched thousands of children walk out of here better than when they walked in." He turned to the chalkboard and gently touched the faint residue of equations that would never be erased. "This place raised me after Marie died. It gave me purpose when I had nothing left. How could I walk away and let it all disappear? Like it never mattered. I didn't give those kids my money. I gave them proof that someone believed in them. That this school believed in them." Elena stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "You were going to disappear. You were going to leave us without saying goodbye. After everything, you were just going to vanish." Harland's voice finally cracked, the first time any of them had ever heard it break. "I thought if I left quietly, none of you would have to carry me. I didn't want to be another burden in a year that already took everything from us. The room went silent. Then Mike did something none of them expected. He walked up to Harland and pulled the older man into a tight hug, the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. "You idiot," Mike whispered, voice breaking. "You were never a burden. You were the reason we survived this year." Elena and Paul joined them. The four of them stood there in the empty classroom, holding on to the man who had tried to give everything away so they wouldn't hurt. That was the moment it truly broke them. Not the school closings, not the lost jobs. It was realizing that Harland had spent his last months trying to make sure no one would miss him, while quietly becoming unforgettable to every single person he touched. In the end, they didn't let him disappear. They helped him build the cabin in Montana. They visited every summer and every year on the anniversary of the last day of Sunset Ridge. The four of them gathered by the lake near his land and remembered the man who taught them that the greatest lessons are never written on a chalkboard. They are lived.